Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Flavor of the Week, brought to you by Banditos, fresh, made daily. In Flavor of the Week, Kyle sits down with one of our local priests over 4 different episodes to sample variations of a favorite food or drink while they discuss the ins and outs of life as a priest.
Previously on Flavor of the Week with Monsignor Owen Campion.
All of my teachers were Dominican Sisters of St. Cecilia. When I was in high school, my heroes were not athletes and popular entertainers, but they were the priests.
Sure.
2 of them became bishops. They were a fine group of men.
Yeah.
But I was all over the country. I said something about Gorbachev in Russia.
Uh-huh.
I remember the cardinal did this, pointed to the ceiling. What he was saying was, the place is bugged.
Yeah.
But now, then another thing came in, and this would be of interest to reading a radio audience.
Uh-huh.
In Brazil, now not so much in Argentina, but in Brazil at that time, I don't know what they're doing now, but at that time, there were evangelical groups, primarily from the United States, frankly.
Sure.
And they were going into radio in a very, very big way.
Uh-huh. Like as a missionary tactic.
Just very zealous about it.
Yeah.
And so this was an issue. Now, once you got out of the major cities down there, Sao Paulo, Rio, then you were in these small rural dioceses where they didn't have a lot of money, which about it's the bottom line.
Uh-huh.
So they couldn't start a radio station, maintain a radio station. And then here's an evangelical group from the United States that has money to burn, and they come in and start a station. And the same thing applied with print. Now, of course, print and radio had a very long-standing presence in those countries, as you might assume. But this was a real competitive force. I remember in Brazil, I was in time in Rio. I wanted to go up to Petrópolis, which is about 50 miles outside of Rio. And the Franciscans had a huge Catholic publishing house in Petrópolis. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to go up there and visit. And so I thought, gosh, Rio is equal to Chicago and New York as far as traffic is concerned. And I thought, well, I'll get lost for the rest of my life down here. So I got not only a car, but I hired a driver. Mm-hmm. I rarely did that, but I did in those huge cities.
Yeah.
So he was driving to me to Petrópolis. Well, of course, he was a Brazilian Catholic.
Uh-huh.
He mentioned a very prominent American politician.
Does he know that you're a Monsignor or a priest?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. That's the reason he's telling me all
gotcha.
this. Fluent in English. And so he had often had a job from the American consulate in Rio to drive prominent visitors.
Gotcha.
So this major politician, I won't mention his name, but he ran for president one time.
Okay.
He came down. Well, I happen to know his religious background. So anyway, it was one of the fundamentalist churches. So this man started talking, and he said, do you know anything about these people? He named this fundamentalist church in the United States. And I said, well, I know something about them. He said, well, they make me so mad. And I said, well, how's that? And he said, my grandmother's a saint. And he said, she says the rosary every day. And he said she has a picture of Our Lady of Aparecida. Now, she, the Blessed Mother, patroness of Brazil.
Okay.
Said in her living room she has a big picture of Our Lady of Aparecida. And he said this fundamentalist preacher from the United States started a church in her neighborhood and went door to door. He came to see her and came in and saw the picture. And he told her he was going to hell. He said, I wish I'd been there when he told my grandmother she's going to hell. He said, she's a saint. And I knew the politician was. So then he said, so-and-so came down for this governmental meeting in Rio. And they hired me to drive him around, and I told him the story that I was so offended and outraged by this evangelical from the United States. And I said to him, what church you go to? And he said, well, I'm a Presbyterian. Well, I happen to know this guy was no more Presbyterian than I was.
Yeah.
He told him, but that was the kind of thing that we did. Then I left that job, and then I was appointed to the Council for Communications at the Holy See, and we met 3 times a year for a week in Rome. So Archbishop Foley served for a number of years there, and then he was named a cardinal. He was a cardinal for about maybe 2 years tops. I remember I went over for the ceremony when he received the red hat. And as this gives you an idea how respected he was, there were about 50 of us from the United States that went over there for that event. And we stayed in the same hotel. It was a lot of fun. And there were several events that we had a big dinner for him. But he had to cancel out. Every time the time came, we'd get a call from him that he was so sick he just couldn't come. So I remember the day of the ceremony, coincidentally, I ran into him in St. Peter's Basilica before the ceremony. I got there early and ran into him. I asked him how he felt, and he said, well, he felt awful, but he just had to be there. Well, I would say in a year, he got a terrible diagnosis. They found it. So he was from Philadelphia, came back in January, and moved into the retirement home for priests, which is a nursing care facility, part of it. And he died in December. But, of course, I kept my membership on the Council of Communications, even though he had died. And that was very rewarding in a lot of ways, but mainly because of the contacts that you would make at the Holy See and Catholic communicators from around the world. I don't think I hear things said sometime. The officials at the Holy See whom I met were many of them are gone now, but they were fine people, and of course the Catholic communicators. By that time, the emphasis had switched a little bit from Latin America to Asia, and I would say one place would have been Hong Kong, because the British were leaving or then left Hong Kong.
When is this?
Well, Hong Kong had become a major center of Catholic communications when the British were there, because, among other things, the British have free speech and free worship.
Sure.
Well, then the Chinese communists came in. That's another story. So the Catholic communicators there, who would have been Chinese, they didn't know what to think. So they had these big broadcast facilities, for example. Are we going to be shut down, put out of business? Or they had big publishing houses. Are we going to be put out of business when the Brits leave? Because you see, the British they supported them. It's part of the British heritage, free speech and free religion.
Yeah.
Of course, they go back 500 years, another matter. But the last several hundred years.
Yeah.
And, their views of free speech and the freedom of religion, the British views at now, don't go back to Henry VIII, I'm talking about right now, are as comprehensive as would be Americans' views.
Right.
Well, when they left Hong Kong and the Chinese communists followed them into power, what did that mean for Catholic communications? And, of course, some left Hong Kong. Some of they just wouldn't take the chance of being shut down by the communists.
So how often were you going over there?
Well, I probably, the last several years I was, before the Brits left and right after they left, I might have been in Hong Kong 4 times a year.
Did you ever feel like you had to kind of hide your Catholicism?
Not under the Brits.
Right.
Not under the British.
Right, but once communism takes over?
You had to watch your step.
Yeah.
I was an American.
Mm-hmm.
They have said they had an unusual situation. They had forget what they called it now, one country, two systems. So the mainland was very different from Hong Kong. So now they have all these riots that are going on the second week of June over there in Hong Kong as this interview is occurring.
Yeah.
So it has not totally been paradise on earth.
Of course.
But they did allow capitalism to remain. Theoretically, there remained freedom of religion to remain. But there's, I think, always this shadow in the background of what might happen. I was in Rome, probably within the last year, at the airport. And I was waiting for my flight to come back to the U.S. And at the adjoining gate, I paid no attention to it, but at the adjoining gate was a plane going to Hong Kong.
Uh-huh.
And so I was sitting there, and Catholic communicator from Hong Kong, whom I knew back there, she was on her way back home.
Really?
Saw me and came over and sat down and
Uh-huh.
talked. Now, this would be 2018.
Yeah.
And she was worried.
Yeah.
And so, of course, another thing they worried about was, you see, they're British subjects by birth.
Mm-hmm.
British citizenship was extended to people who were born in Hong Kong. So legally, they were not Chinese.
Okay.
So a lot of those people, from Hong Kong, just simply, they were Chinese and so forth, but they just exercised their rights of British citizenship and moved to England, which they'd never seen. But in England, at least, they would be free.
Right. So this whole time that you're traveling around for the Vatican, doing these communications, consulting or seminars, whatever you're doing, is Our Sunday Visitor playing a role in this? Are you able to use some of your connections here at Our Sunday Visitor to plug in?
Yes. What I would try to do is dovetail as much as I could.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would write, for example, in Poland, I would write, or in Brazil, for Our Sunday Visitor about what I saw. And I'd be down there for another purpose, but I would use that opportunity.
Be sure to join us next time for more of Flavor of the Week with Monsignor Owen Campion.